Dolly Sod's wilderness of West Virginia unfurls across a high plateau, a sprawling enigma of windswept meadows, gnarled spruce trees, and boulder fields that jut from the earth like the fossilized ribs of some long-dead titan. In the spring of 2015, Peter Hellstrom, a search and rescue officer whose life was etched with 2 decades of scars and a knee that creaked like a rusty hinge, stepped into the shadowed expanse to find Kyle Anders, a 19-year-old college kid swallowed by its depths. What began as a routine mission unraveled into a nightmare of shredded flannel, claw-carved footprints, and a creature that defied the boundaries of reason. A towering, sinewy horror that left the air thick with menace and the ground stained with secrets. The authorities scribbled it off as a bear attack, locked the files in a drawer, and turned their backs. But the truth lingers in those woods, a primal dread that hums through the silence like a predator's breath against your neck. This isn't a tale to dismiss with the comfort of daylight. It's a descent into the wild's abyss, where the earth cradles a ledger of the devoured, and the shadows stretch far beyond West Virginia's sods to whisper of terrors lurking across America's untamed frontiers. Welcome to the forbidden excavation of Dolly Sod's darkest mystery, and the chilling echoes that resonate through a nation's wilderness. The call to the wild, into the heart of Dolly Sod's. Peter Hellstrom was 38 that year, a man whose wiry frame and weathered hands bore the marks of a life spent wrestling with the wild 2 decades of fieldwork for the U.S. Forest Service, a knee that ached from a fall 3 years prior in the Shenandoah, and a quiet pride in his ability to read the land like a book written in trails and wind. He'd pulled lost hikers from ravines in the Rockies, tracked hunters through Maine's fog-drenched forests, and faced the occasional strangeness. Raving souls claiming lights danced in the trees or voices called from the dark. Search and rescue was his crucible, a job of long hours and brutal terrain, and he carried it with a lean pack. A crackling radio, a folding knife, a map creased from use, and a stubborn belief he could outwit whatever nature threw at him. No gun. Forest Service policy discouraged firearms unless the threat was undeniable, and this case seemed straightforward enough. Kyle Anders, a 19-year-old college kid with a penchant for stargazing, had vanished 2 days earlier in Dolly Sod's, last seen by his buddies after wandering off post-argument, claiming he needed space and a view of the night sky. A reckless choice in a wilderness notorious for its sudden storms and trails that twist like a maze designed to confound. He arrived at dawn on the first day, the sky a bruised canopy of gray pressing down on the plateau. Dolly Sod's greeted him with a paradox. Sweeping meadows rolling under the wind, their grasses swaying like a sea frozen in motion, flanked by spruce trees bent into grotesque shapes by decades of gales, their branches clawing at the air. Boulder fields punctuated the landscape, their moss-slick surfaces gleaming faintly, relics of some ancient upheaval that left them scattered like the bones of a giant beast. The air carried a sharp chill, mingled with the earthy musk of damp soil and the faint tang of pine resin, a scent that clung to the back of his throat. Peter joined a small team, Jenna, a ranger with a steady voice and sharper eyes, Richie, a wiry volunteer with a dark humor, and a handful of others whose names blurred in the haze of the task. They fanned out along the trails near Kyle's last known location, a campsite marked by a cold fire pit and a tent still sagging in the gloom. They called his name into the wind, their voices swallowed by a void that seemed to mock their efforts, boots crunching against the damp earth in a rhythm that felt too loud in the stillness. The first day dragged on, heavy and uneventful, the forest yielding only fragments. By mid-morning, Richie found a crushed water bottle snagged in a bramble patch, its plastic crumpled as if gripped in a panic, the cap missing. Peter crouched beside it, tracing its edges with gloved fingers, the silence pressing harder now, a weight that settled into his chest. An hour later, Jenna spotted a glove, Kyle's size, torn and abandoned under a spruce, its wool fibers frayed as if clawed apart. Richie cracked, "City kid versus wilderness, round 1. But the laugh died fast, brittle against the quiet. The woods felt alive yet hushed, the spruce standing like sentinels, their needles blanketing the ground in a carpet that muffled sound. By late afternoon, the light faded into an awkward gray, shadows blurring into a haze that tricked the eye, turning every trunk into a shape that might move. Peter's knee throbbed, a dull nag he ignored, his map rustling as he traced their grid under a flickering lantern back at camp. The forest loomed beyond the fire's glow, its edges melting into a wall of shadow, whispering secrets he couldn't yet hear. That night, sleep eluded him. The wind howled through the sods, a mournful wail that rattled the tent, and he lay staring at the canvas, the glove's frayed edges flickering in his mind. He'd seen lost hikers before, disoriented, hypothermic, sometimes dead. But this felt different, a thread of unease he couldn't shake. The silence wasn't empty. It was watchful, a presence that pressed against the thin fabric separating him from the wild. The second day, whispers turned to warnings. Dawn broke cold and gray on the second day, the team splitting into pairs to widen their net. Peter volunteered to scout a ridge a mile northeast after Jenna's radio crackled with a report. Someone had glimpsed something red in the trees, a fleeting blur against the green. He craved the solitude, a chance to escape the group's chatter and stretch his legs, his knee protesting with each step as he carved a path into the wilderness. The trail twisted into an overgrown patch, spruce and thorns knitting a dense wall that dimmed the light to a sickly greenish glow. The air thickened, damp earth, pine sap, a faint sour note he couldn't place, while the woods went eerily quiet. No birds sang, no leaves rustled, just the crunch of his boots on the spongy ground and the whistle of wind threading through the branches. He hated that silence, the way it felt like nature holding its breath, sizing him up. 50 feet off the trail, he found it. A red flannel shirt tangled in a thorn bush, its fabric shredded into ribbons, threads splayed like a web torn by something vast and furious. Up close, the tears weren't natural snags. They were rips, deliberate and jagged, with faint streaks of dried blood crusting the cuffs, a dull brown against the crimson cloth. His pulse quickened, a jolt of adrenaline sharpening his senses, the forest's hush growing heavier, as if it leaned in to watch. He radioed Jenna, his voice steady despite the static that swallowed her reply, the ridge's elevation choking the signal into a hiss of white noise. Grumbling about government-issued junk, he slipped the shirt into his pack and scanned the ground. That's when he saw the footprints, fresh, pressed deep into the wet soil, longer and broader than Kyle's boot size from the profile they'd been given, toes clawing into the earth like hooks, leaving punctures that glistened with moisture. Bare, he told himself, but the stride was wrong. Too long, too even, the spacing suggesting something upright, something that walked with purpose rather than lumbered. The tracks pulled him forward, a magnetic draw he couldn't resist, though his gut screamed to turn back, a primal warning that prickled his skin. He followed them 100 yards, weaving through spruce that clawed at his jacket, their branches snapping with brittle cracks that echoed too loudly in the stillness. The trail stopped near a cluster of moss-covered boulders, massive slabs stacked haphazardly like a shrine abandoned by time. Between two rocks lay Kyle's backpack, slashed open, its contents strewn across the dirt. A flashlight flickering weakly, its beams stuttering against the gloom. A half-eaten protein bar, wrapper torn. A notebook sodden from dew but legible, its pages curling at the edges. Peter knelt, flipping through it under the dim light. Sketches of spruce trees, notes on Orion and Cassiopeia, then a shift to frantic scrawl. It watches at night. It's not a bear. It's tall. Too tall. I don't think it wants me to leave. The words sank into him, cold and sharp, a puzzle piece he couldn't place. A sharp snap, branch underfoot, jerked his head up, his breath catching. He scanned the trees, shadows shifting in the haze, his hand darting to his belt. The knife felt flimsy, the whistle absurd. No gun. A choice he cursed now as the sound came again, closer, deliberate, not wind or wildlife. The air grew heavier, pressing against his chest like a storm about to break, the sour tang sharpening into something metallic, something alive. He stood, pack slung over one shoulder, the notebook clutched in his hand, eyes darting to every rustle, every flicker of movement that might not be the wind. The third day, the beast breaks free. Day 3 dawned with a chill that seeped into the bones, the sky a slate of clouds that smothered the light into a flat, oppressive gray. Peter retraced the ridge alone, the team scattered across their grid, his radio spitting static into a void that offered no reply. The air thickened with each step, damp earth, pine resin, a rancid whiff of rot that twisted his gut and clung to his throat like a second skin. The boulders loomed ahead, their moss-slick surfaces glinting faintly, shadows stretching long and jagged across the ground. He circled them, Kyle's scrawl looping in his mind, too tall, the words a drumbeat against the silence. His knee ached, a steady throb he pushed through, the forest pressing closer, its spruce and thorns weaving a cage that dimmed the world to dusk. He found the boulders again mid-morning, their presence a lodestone drawing him back. The backpack lay where he'd left it, untouched, the flashlight's beam dead now, its batteries drained into the dirt. He crouched, tracing the slashed canvas with his fingers, when the air shifted, heavier, electric, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. A rustle, not wind, not leaves, prickled his ears, and he rose, knife in hand, turning slow. Then he saw it, a shape between the trees, blending with bark and shadow, wiry yet immense, 7 or 8 feet of sinew and menace that seemed to drink the light. Its skin was dark, mottled like tree bark, patched with moss and lichen that clung like a living shroud, limbs too long, bending at angles that defied bone and muscle. Its head tilted, canine yet grotesque, a snout stretched wide, bristling with jagged teeth that gleamed wetly, eyes glinting with a cold, predatory gleam that pinned him where he stood. The stench hit, a grave's breath, rot and earth mingled with a metallic tang that coated his tongue. His legs screamed to run, but he froze, instincts warring. Stillness might save him, movement might doom him. It watched, head cocked, sizing him up, its claws long, hooked, obscene, twitching faintly. Then it moved, faster than its bulk should allow, closing from 30 feet to 10 in a heartbeat, a blur of muscle and malice that split the air. Peter scrambled back, slamming against a boulder, wind knocked out, knife slashing wildly in a desperate arc. The blade bit its arm, sinking into flesh that felt too dense, too wrong, dark tar-like blood oozing onto his hand, hot and sticky. It snarled, a guttural scream that shook the trees, a sound that vibrated through his ribs and clawed at his sanity. He bolted, crashing through the underbrush, thorns tearing at his jacket, adrenaline drowning sense and pain. Behind, it tore after him, each step a thunderous crack, branches snapping like bones under its weight. His foot caught a root, ankle twisting, pain searing white-hot up his leg, but he forced himself up, limping, breath ragged. The forest blurred, spruce and shadow, a maze with no end, until he burst into a clearing, faint flashlight glows piercing the gloom. Jenna's team. He screamed, voice raw, waving his arms, relief a fleeting spark as the creature barreled in behind him, feral and unrelenting. Richie turned, face draining to ash, too slow. Its claws swiped, a wet thud as he crumpled, blood pooling dark against the earth. The others scattered, Jenna's scream cutting the air as she grabbed Peter's arm, half dragging him toward the trucks. The thing crouched over Richie, claws rending with an efficiency that turned Peter's stomach, its head tilting as if savoring the kill content. For now, to let them flee. The aftermath, a truth entombed. Dawn broke cold and gray, backup arriving in a flurry of dust and urgency. Rangers, a sheriff's deputy, guided by Peter's garbled radio pleas and a flare's dying glow. They found Richie's remains, torso torn, face frozen in shock. Kyle's body under a pile of leaves and rocks, wounds too precise, too deliberate for a bear. The coroner muttered inconclusive. The report a neat lie. Rogue bear attack, case closed. Jenna slipped Peter the notebook later, whispering it, fell through the cracks, her eyes haunted. He resigned a month later, the notebook a silent sentinel on his bookshelf, buried between field guides and old maps. He developed its final sketch in a basement darkroom, a blurred nightmare of elongated limbs, teeth like shards, a truth he locked away, but he couldn't let it rest. He dug into old reports, early 1900 sightings in Dolly Sods, missing hikers, strange tracks in the mud, descriptions of a tall shadow that watched from the trees. Patterns emerged, whispers of something ancient, territorial, lurking. The forest hadn't birthed it that day. It had always been there, waiting. And it wasn't alone. In 2007, Ransom Corbin faced a chuffing horror in Wyoming's Absaroka Range, Joel Atkins' bones in a cave of macabre trophies, a black-furred beast with a boar-wolf jaw. In 1998, Kenton Absher fled a long-limbed stalker in Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains, Troy Marchant's body clawed beyond reason, a clicking shadow in the dusk. In 2018, Colin Dwyer met a wolf-jawed terror in Alaska's Wrangell St. Elias, Devon Thorne's scream silenced by a fur-clad nightmare. In 2013, Elias Reading battled a clicking predator in Washington's North Cascades, Mason Thorne's blood staining a lake, a Wendigos echo in the dark. In 2007, Conrad Lai hunted a skin wolf in Idaho's Sawtooth, a sibling's ribs splayed like a broken wheel, a cave of bones its lair. In 2013, Callum Weatherby faced a rasping giant in Wrangell St. Elias, Franklin Dodd gnawed in a creek, tracks circling the kill. In 2007, Nolan Victory ran from a bone collector in Idaho's Selkirks, Rick Callahan crushed, a trophy pile its mark. In 2016, Brian Carver saw a charred horror in Wrangell St. Elias, James Koenig hung like a grotesque chime, a Kushtaka's shadow. In 2017, Morgan Tate met the snapper in Washington's Olympic National Park, a boy's windbreaker-soaked dark, a clicking menace in the mist. The pattern unraveled, a wilderness alive with dread. These aren't isolated horrors. They're stitches in a fabric of terror woven across North America's wild places. Footprints too vast, clawed, upright, pacing with purpose, twice a man's stride. Bones arranged, piles topped with antlers, circles of gnawed remains, femurs grooved by unseen claws. Gear shredded, tents slashed, packs torn, lives scattered like leaves. The evidence spans decades, from West Virginia's sods to Alaska's glaciers, Idaho's canyons to Tennessee's ridges, Washington's rainforests to Wyoming's peaks. Cherokee tales whisper of long-limbed stalkers hunting at dusk, Athabascan legends of Colette harbingers drawn to tragedy, settler logs of man-beasts dismissed as fear-addled rants. In the 1950s, Selkirk hunters vanished, bones stacked in clearings. In the 1920s, a Smokies trapper burned his shack after a wolf thing, dragged his partner into the night, his journal a relic of dread. In 1970s Alaska, a Wrangell hiker disappeared, claw marks his epitaph, the site sealed without explanation. What stalks these woods? A creature, ancient, relentless. Its form a grotesque mockery of nature's design? Its canine jaws, its too long limbs, its human cunning echo across states. A lineage of terror that defies biology. Or is it men, warped by isolation into predators of their own? Hunters turned ritualists, guarding their lairs with bone and blood? The caves, the clearings, the scattered remains. Their ledgers, tallying a debt we refuse to pay. Authorities bury the truth. Bear attacks, cougar maulings, exposure. A litany of lies to shield us from the abyss. Why? Because to name it is to unravel our illusion of control. We're not the apex here. Something else reigns, its claws scraping the earth, its eyes glinting in the gloom. Dolly Sods hums with it still. Hikers vanish, 2 in 2016 near Bear Rocks. Their tent shredded, no bodies found. A camper in 2019, his gear strewn, a single boot left behind. The Cascades, the Smokies, the Sawtooths. Each harbors its own whispers, its own tracks, its own silences. The wild doesn't forget. It waits, patient and vast, its shadows stretching long. Picture yourself as Peter, back pressed against that boulder, the creature's tar blood dripping onto your hand, its snarl vibrating through your chest like a death knell. Would you stand, knife trembling, to stare into the truth of its eyes, or run, praying the forest's maze swallows your scent before it does? And if you stood in that clearing, the suffocating hush creeping through the spruce on a moonless night, would you step closer, drawn to the unknown, or flee, hoping it never finds you again? Your choice might reveal how deep you'd venture before the wild claims its toll. Dali Sods endures, its trails beckoning the brave, the reckless, the naive. The beast, or whatever it was, lurks, its presence a shadow over the plateau, its hunger a rhythm older than us. From West Virginia to Wyoming, Alaska to Idaho, the wilderness cradles secrets we're not ready to face. Next time you wander too far, listen. The snap of a twig, the hum of something vast, the silence that isn't empty. It's out there watching, waiting, and it knows you're alone.